again in a different way, in a different terminology. And this chapter in itself is a whole package. So let's try to understand this chapter very nicely. So we're going to split this understanding of this chapter into 2 sessions. So today and tomorrow, over these 2 sessions, we are going to understand the entire essence of the Bhagavad Gita in the form of the 18th chapter. So let's start with our invocatory prayers. So joining your palms together. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Ajnanatimirandhasya Jnananjana Shalakaya Chakshurunmilitam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha. Namo Vishnupadaya Krishna Prishthaya Bhutale Srimate Bhaktivedanta Swaminiti Namine. Namaste Saraswate Deve Gauravani Pracharine Nirvishesha Shunyavadi Paschatya Deshatarine. Jaya Sri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Shivasadi Gaura Bhakta Vrinda. Hare Krishna 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 Hare Hare, Hare Rama 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 Hare Hare. Hare Krishna. So let's begin our study of chapter number 18. And the 18th chapter is called as Moksha Yoga. Moksha means the process of liberation. So chapter number 18 is called Moksha Yoga. Moksha here means liberation, or one can even extend that understanding as, the ultimate perfection of life. Right? So that is what we are going to understand, the yoga of liberation. So this chapter again, once again begins with Arjuna asking a question. So in text number 1, Arjuna once again is going to ask a very pertinent question, because throughout the Bhagavad Gita, if we see, the main, apart from all the philosophy that we studied, but the main call for action that we see in the Bhagavad Gita is about how Krishna essentially wanted Arjuna to be engaged with this world of matter, specifically in the form of his prescribed duties, which means stay connected to this material world through our worldly responsibilities, through our worldly duties. And while doing them in a detached way, one can remain aloof from the reactions to the work, right? So while Arjuna wanted to become a renunciate by becoming disconnected from this world, Krishna wanted Arjuna to still remain connected to this world, but disconnect from the results of actions. So this theme of, so Arjuna is going to capture this theme by asking a question by using 2 specific terms. He says, Arjuna Uvacha, he says, Sanyasa Mahabaho Tattvam Ichhami Veditum Tyagascha Hrishikesha Pritakkeshi Nishudana. So he says, oh Krishna, Sanyasa. So he uses one word called as Sanyasa. Sanyasa Mahabaho Tattvam Ichhami Veditum. So I wish to understand what is the sannyasa. Sannyasa here means it is a renounced order of life. Renounced order of life. Okay. Versus Tyagasya Hrishikesha. Tyaga. Tyaga here means the process of renunciation. So Arjuna essentially wanted to understand the difference between the renounced order of life and renunciation itself, right? And this is a very important question because there's a difference between renounced order. Renounced order means here a person who has given up all their material engagements and has now gone into seclusion for their own spiritual advancement. And then there's a person who is renouncing the fruits of one's action. So what is the difference between these two, right? Very, very important section, this one. So from text 2 through 12, we're going to hear Krishna's analysis on this subject. So Krishna's reply, right? So this is how the Lord defines this. So what does he say? Kamyanam karmanam nyasam sannyasam kavayo viduhu. So Krishna talks about these two things. First he says, what is sannyasa? Or who is a renunciate? Or sannyasi means a renunciate. So we'll use that term. So what does such a sannyasi do? Kamyanam karmanam nyasam. He gives up activities based on material desires, right? So basically gives up activities based on material desires. Or in other words, he gives up all kinds of fruitive actions. Fruitive means where you're trying to enjoy the results of your actions. So he basically gives up all those kinds of activities. Whereas a tyagi, right? Or here, one who's tyagi here means one exhibiting renunciation. Right? So what does such a tyagi do? So tyagi is the one sarva karma phalatyagam prahu tyagam vichakshana. So sarva karma phalatyaga means one who is giving up giving up the results of one's activities. Now, externally, if you see these two terms, they look very similar. Sannyasi and Tyagi, both are renouncing, right? But there is one very, very important difference, and which is a key difference for us to understand, which I would like to, capture in one statement. Every sannyasi is a Tyagi, but every Tyagi is not a sannyasi. Which means every renunciate, a genuine renunciate, every genuine sannyasi exhibits renunciation. But everyone exhibiting renunciation here means giving up the fruits of one's action. Everyone who is exhibiting this tyaga is not necessarily a sannyasi. which means that to exhibit renunciation, one need not give up one's engagements in this world. One can still be socially engaged and still become a tyagi, right? So this is the essential difference. So this is a theme that we saw already in the second chapter itself. Like I said, literally every concept that the 18th chapter is going to talk about, we will see it, its echoes in the previous chapters as well, right? So basically here, this is a person who is so advanced that they perform no action, and consequently they experience no karma. They don't experience any karmic reactions as well, right? Whereas here they have no attachments to the fruits of their action, and therefore they experience no karmic reaction or no karma. So you see, both the sannyasi and the tyagi, from a internal point of view, are not experiencing any karmic reactions. But externally, one has given up action, other has still engaged in this world. So we also use, if you remember our discussion from the second chapter, such a person is a jnani, and such a person was the buddhi yogi, right? Where we discuss the formula karma on the platform of jnana with the mood intention of bhakti, right? So such a person is engaging with this world but not getting any reactions like that. And Krishna is now, so he says that actually both these paths are actually are bona fide. Some learned men declare that all kinds of fruitive activities should be given up as a fault. Here he is talking about how the jnanis think. They are the ones who extensively promote this concept of sannyasa, in a sense that in the jnani tradition, the jnana yoga tradition, serious spirituality begins after you renounce this world. Only when you become a sannyasi, then you can practice spirituality. That is the the implication in many jnani traditions, right? So then, and of course, for somebody who's actually genuinely so advanced, in a sense, they are detached from the worldliness, such people, they can take up to this pras, and it is a very, very bona fide process, as we discussed in the second chapter. So such jnanis, they give up all kinds of fruitive activities, because inherently every activity is going to create a reaction, and therefore there are some faults in it, right? Yet other sages maintain that acts of sacrifice, charity, and penance should never be abandoned. So in this buddhi yoga tradition, what do we see? These three things that we spoke of in the 17th chapter: yajna, dana, and tapa. Yajna means sacrifice. Dana means charity. Tapa means penance, austerity. These three activities are never given up, right? So in a sense, they are still engaging with this world, but externally or internally, they don't have attachments, and therefore they are as good as the sannyasis in terms of the karmic reactions that they may have to face, like that. So then this is now here about this whole process of, and it's very interesting, Krishna uses the word tyago hi purusha vyagraha. So he refers to Arjuna as, oh, tiger among purusha vyagra. Vyagra means a tiger. So, oh, tiger among people, among men, hear about this process of renunciation, because this process of tyaga is not for the faint-hearted people. It is not easy to take up to this process of spirituality. You need a very high level of internal determination, and therefore, tiger is known for its intense determination, especially when it's on a hunt. If a tiger is chasing someone, it will never give up until it actually catches its prey. Even if it means it takes years, but if a tiger maps someone that this animal or whatever is my prey, it never ever gives up. That is a high level of determination a tiger has. So Krishna is indirectly invoking, he's calling Arjuna as, oh, tiger among men. Among human beings, you have the determination like a tiger. So if you see the Mahabharata also, Arjuna exhibits very, very high levels of determination throughout, for achieving his goals like that. So then he says that how these three things, yajna, dana, tapah, karma, nyatyagyam, karyam, evatat, they should never be given up. And based on that, Krishna is now going to define what is renunciation. What is the true definition of renunciation, especially according to the three modes. Right? So first, he says, okay. So he says that actually this yajna, dana, tapa, indirectly they are indicating our prescribed duties. So those prescribed duties should never be given up. Right? So, and then he defines that what is renunciation then in mode of goodness? He says, anyone, so first he says, prescribed duty should never be renounced. If one gives up his prescribed duties because of illusion, such renunciation is said to be in the mode of ignorance. Then he says, anyone who gives up prescribed duties as troublesome. So let's actually write down what is mode of ignorance renunciation. In mode of ignorance, where one gives up because of illusion, gives up work or gives up duty due to illusion. Some misdirected philosophy, some misdirected worldview, and they just give up their duties, right? Because not being guided in the proper way, right? Such kind of renunciation is in the mode of ignorance. And what about in the mode of passion? Yes, renunciation can also be exhibited in the mode of passion. Anyone who gives up prescribed duties as troublesome. So in the mode of passion, again one gives up duty, right? But out of fear of bodily discomfort, right? Due to fear of bodily discomfort. Who is going to do this particular action? Sometimes we tend to rationalize our laziness as detachment, right? Somebody doesn't want to do something, so then they say, oh, instead of openly admitting that, I'm lazy, I don't feel like doing something, they say, what is the use of working so hard in this life? Anyway, at the time of death, I'm not going to take any of this wealth and, all these so-called material possessions. Let me be renounced. That is actually renunciation in the mode of passion. That's not genuine again. But what is real renunciation, which is in the mode of goodness? He says, one who performs his prescribed duties only because it ought to be done and renounces all material association and all attachment to the fruits, such renunciation is said to be in the mode of goodness. So basically, the theme that we discussed last time as well, any activity done out of a sense of duty is by default in the mode of goodness. So even the renunciation one takes up to out of a sense of duty. Duty to whom? Duty to one's society, duty towards the Lord. So that is the mood of a renunciate. Because one who enters into the renounced order of life, for them, it's not that they have given up a family or a community, but rather they have adopted all the world as their own family. And therefore, for them, it is a sense of duty, it is a sense of service towards the whole society is what that motivates one to enter into that renounced order of life. Right? So therefore, it is not that kind of an escapism that we saw in the mode, like in the mode of passion, or just some wild illusory idea as we saw in mode of ignorance. But rather, such renunciation is rooted in a sense of duty towards the whole society, like that. So one who performs a prescribed duty only because it ought to be done and renounces all material association and attachment to all fruits, such renunciation is said to be in the mode of goodness. So duty and non-fruitive mentality. Right? This is the symptom of the renunciation in the mode of goodness. Right? So now, so essentially what is Krishna saying to Arjuna is that you have to be of this world and of this world, right? We discussed this, if you remember. So Krishna's reply is how to be of this world and yet aloof from this world, right? So how do we do that? Because the moment I engage in action, I'm going to get my, just like when you jump into water, your hands are going to, your entire body is going to get wet. So how do I engage with this world? How do I engage with the three gunas and still not get affected by the gunas, still not get affected by karmic reactions? To understand that, we have to understand the whole science of work, right? Remember when we discussed, let's take a new sheet. That's sheet number 2. So if you remember our definition of Buddhi Yoga, right? We spoke about how there is karma on the strong platform of jnana and with the mood and intention of bhakti, right? So and we also discussed while karma tells you what to do, jnana tells you how to do, and bhakti tells you why to do, right? And we also discussed how the last 6 chapters are predominantly focusing on this jnana aspect, especially from chapter 13 to 18. They are especially the first half of 18, they are focusing especially on this jnana part. And what does this jnana tell you? Basically, what is that how part? That how part is this knowledge of work. Which means, how should one engage in work or in action in a way that one does not get incriminated by further karmic reactions? So that whole science of work is once again going to be summarized. We discussed this in few chapters, right? But once again, we're going to see this. So text number 13 to 17. So Krishna is going to, as part of knowledge of work, Krishna is going to talk about an important concept called 5 factors of work. So for any work to be done, there are these 5 factors that are involved, right? So what are they? So he says, according to Vedanta, there are 5 causes for accomplishment of any action. So, O Arjuna, now hear them from me. Adhishtanam tatha karta karanam cha pratak vidham vividhascha pratak cheshta daivam chaivata panchamam. So he talks about these 5 terms. Let's write that down. The first one is called adhishtanam. So adhishtanam here means the place of work. So where is work happening within us? In the body. Body is the finally the external means by which all work is done. So in this case, it means the body of jiva. So adhishtanam tatha karta. Karta means here the performer, or basically whoever is instigating that work. Instigator of work, of that action, right? So who is instigating that action? Now this is a slightly challenging concept to understand. At this point, we may very easily say it is the soul, but it's not exactly the soul, but it is the consciousness of the soul is the consciousness of the soul reflected through the false ego. Ahankara vimudhatma karta aham iti manyate. So basically it is that, if you remember, this is a theme that we studied in the fifth chapter, where we saw the whole flow of how action happens. In text number 12, 13, and 14, we discussed this concept, how basically action happens. So there is the living entity, the soul, who is the desiring doer, right? So let's actually write that down. So we spoke about these three kind of actions. So first there is the jiva, who is the desiring doer. Then there is Ishvara, or in this case the Paramatma, who is the sanctioning doer. And finally we had Prakriti, which is the acting doer or the functioning doer. Right? So these three terms, Jiva, Paramatma, and Prakriti, Krishna is now going to elaborate into these 5 factors. So Adhishtanam, Tatha Karta, then there is Karanam. Here means the instruments of action. So what are the instruments through which I'm acting? Basically through my body. Specifically body here means the senses. Then Cheshta, means the endeavor. Which is happening at the level of the prana. Right? Because what happens, what do I mean by the endeavor? The mind may want some action to be performed, but the mind creates a movement in the prana of the body. Prana is like the life air of the body, which causes the physical body to move. Right? So the mind may say, okay, move your hand. But what happens exactly? The mind creates a stimuli, a trigger for action or an endeavor. Right? And what does that endeavor do? It causes the prana to be activated, and that prana then moves the physical sense, which is the karanam. So the cheshta here is that endeavor. And finally, there is a daivam. Here is, it means, the controller, the super soul. So if you look at this chart, so literally, so the jiva that we spoke about, the desiring doer, here is the karta. The Paramatma is the daivam. And all these three, the body, adhishtanam, karanam, and cheshta, all these three come in the category of prakriti. So basically the same concept of the 3 doers that we studied in the 5th chapter of the Bhagavad Gita, Krishna has elaborated now, but this is a little more clear, because understand that all these 5 factors, they go into play. It is an interplay of all these 5 factors. And especially this is important to understand, especially the last principle of Daivam, super soul, is so important. Many times the body is present, the action is instigated, the senses and prana are triggered, but still an activity does not happen, or you may not get result also. Basically all these 5 factors also described, to get a result in any particular action, we need all these 5 factors to come together. So one cannot neglect the importance of Daiva, who is ultimately that sanctioning doer. Without the interference of the Daiva, one's action cannot be physically manifested. And therefore we have to understand that we are not the doers. Right? Behind every action, many times we put so much of effort in planning and organizing and execution. And despite that, when sometimes failures come, we become so bewildered. We have to understand that these first four factors alone are not the factors of work, but the success factor also involves the daivam, the super soul element. So we also have to work from that point of view, in a sense, how do we attract the grace of the Lord in ensuring that we achieve success in any endeavor. So these five factors, right, put together, adhishtanam karta karnam cheshta daivam, right? So he says, so these five factors. So whatever right or wrong actions a man performs by his body, mind, or speech is caused by these five factors. So whether at a physical level, mental level, at a vocal level, all these things, finally these five factors are all only involved. Therefore, one who thinks himself the only doer, not considering the five factors, is certainly not very intelligent. So we have to understand all these factors are going into any particular action. And very important, the 17th sutra. One who is not motivated by false ego, whose intelligence is not entangled, although he kills men in this world, does not kill, nor is he bound by his actions. So when do we say that an action is a materialistic action? Is when it is motivated by the false ego. Right? This is a very important point. Let's write that down. So an action is karmic. An action is karmic in nature if motivated by false ego. Right? So for such a person, while living, so when, remember, the whole theme we are discussing now is how to be off the world and off the world. So while you're belonging to this world, if your actions are motivated with a false ego, then you'll get further and further entangled. So having understood these five factors of work, now Krishna is going to go into a really long section from text number 18 to text number 40. Krishna is going to talk about in every action, so there are three things that go in, or you can say three fundamental building blocks. First, there is the motivation. Then there is the, or let me actually put one more term before that. So first, I have a certain inclination. Right? So which means each and every one of us, we all have a particular nature. Right? These inclinations are born out of our nature. And based on our nature, we will decide to act in a particular domain. Like, for example, one who has the inclination of trying to be an administrator or a king, would enter into an activity within the domain of, say, politics or administration or management and so on. Right? But having entered into that particular domain, the next thing that comes on a very ground level, on a practical day-to-day basis, any simple task that I need to perform, I need to, first of all, find my motivation and the constitution of my action. Right? What do you mean by motivation, constitution? Here, in a sense, what is motivating me at an ideation stage, when the whole action is still within my head? How am I inspired to approach that? Right? So while we discussed earlier, this inclination is primarily talking about what to do, the motivation and constitution mainly are going to talk about the how to do aspect. And that is why this is such a powerful section, because throughout the Bhagavad Gita, we've been hearing about, working without working free from fruitive results, working detached from fruitive results, etc. But what do I need to do? It's nice to hear the vision statement, but what is the mission? How do I actually approach? Give me a step-by-step process, how I can enter into that mode where I'm acting but not getting bound by the reactions. And that exact science, Krishna is going to talk about that, right? So specifically in this section from 18 to 40, he's mainly going to focus on the how part. In the next section, we will see the what part. So in the how part, regarding motivation, right? So you have motivation and constitution. What are the ingredients? What constitutes work? So regarding motivation, Krishna uses these following terms. He says, Jnanam Geyam Parigyata Trividha Karma Chodana, Karanam Karma Kareti Trividha Karma Sangraha. So knowledge, Jnanam. First one is knowledge. Knowledge here is Jnanam. Right? So then he says, Jnanam Geyam. Geyam here means the object of knowledge. Gyayam, Gyayam. And Parigyata here is the knower of the knowledge. Knower of knowledge. Right? Then Karanam Karma Karteti. So Karanam Karma. So Karma means work. Karanam means instruments of action, instruments of work, and Karta. Karta here means the doer of work. So quick explanation about what is this motivation, what is this constitution part, right? So if you look at any action, before an action manifests in the physical plane, it exists in our intellectual plane. Like as an idea, it manifests. And idea, intelligence is always the impetus for action, right? So like, for example, when you get an idea, how to become rich in 1 week. So you will definitely we react, right? But this particular part of the Bhagavad Gita is for those who are now able to very clearly see the dynamics of work within themselves, especially through very nice spiritual practices, through meditation, or to developing some level of sattva guna, mode of goodness. Not notice these 6 layers of processing happening, but this is what is actually happening in the background. And it's all very interesting to note that the knower of knowledge and doer of work finally are the one same. The person who is doing, right, is also the knower. But it's interesting how the terminologies that I used, because when I'm wearing my motivation hat, I am the knower. But when I'm wearing my doer hat, or the action hat, then when I'm defining, when I'm creating my work, right, there I become a constituent in the form of doer of work. So it's very interesting to see, just like how, if you remember, in the 13th chapter of the Gita also, we discussed how the word Purusha and Kshetragya both are referring to the soul, but functionally they are very, very different, like that. So these are very, very specific terms. Now Krishna is going to talk about how all these 6 factors, Jnanam, Geyam, Parigyata, Karma, Karanam, Karta, all these 6 factors, how they operate in the 3 modes, right? So in the mode of goodness, so let's see the first one. So according to 3 different modes of material nature, there are 3 kinds of knowledge, action, and perform action. Now hear from me. Okay. So first he begins with knowledge. So what is the nature of knowledge in mode of goodness? That knowledge by which that one undivided spiritual nature is seen in all living entities. Though they are divided into innumerable forms, you should understand to be in the mode of goodness. Understanding here, when you say, remember, when you talk about that one undivided spiritual nature, it is not talking about how all the souls are one, but rather understand that the nature of all the souls is one. They are all Satchit Ananda. Whereas matter is different from spirit, right? But which means at a physical level, we may see lots of differences in the world around us. We may see different kinds of people. We may see people with different gunas. We may see people coming from different habits, samskaras, cultures, mannerisms, countries, races, etc., etc. But the nature of the person whose motivation, whose knowledge is in mode of goodness, what do? Though they are divided into innumerable forms, you should understand one who sees that one undivided nature, which means they see here is a spirit soul. Externally, the body may be different, the color may be different, the race may be different, the gender may be different, they may be sometimes even the species may be different, right? Such an advanced soul does not even discriminate at that level. So he sees that that one undivided nature. So here, such a person has a very inclusive vision, right? Because he doesn't discriminate, among any different, what are the external differences, but has a very accommodating, very inclusive vision. Whereas that knowledge by which one sees that in every different body, there's a different type of living entity, you should understand to be in the mode of passion. So what does this mode of passion do? They have a very separatist vision. Separatist vision means that they like to divide the world in terms of different categories. And they can't have that kind of a unifying vision, have that kind of an inclusive vision that a person mode of goodness has. They like to divide the world into boxes, right? Which especially in the modern society, we see that a lot. People like to divide things and not see that spiritual essence. The inclusivity at a spiritual level is unfortunately missing today, because people are so much, they only know the body, right? They only know matter, but they don't know the spirit. So naturally, people end up developing that kind of a separatist mentality. Whereas in the mode of ignorance, right, what happens? And that knowledge by which one is attached to one kind of work as the all in all, without knowledge of the truth, and which is very meager, is said to be in the mode of darkness. So one kind of knowledge, all in all. So they have a very exclusive vision. right? So meaning that, even in our practical day-to-day dealings also, you will see sometimes when we interact with people, we see people coming with varieties of perspectives. A person mode of goodness has a kind of an inclusive vision where they try to accommodate all kinds of perspectives and try to see a common thread. Sometimes different people may express their their motivations in different way, or their suggestions in different way, but internally their motivations are still the same. So that kind of an inclusive vision a person mode of goodness sees. Whereas a person mode of passion, when multiple ideas come, they just see, okay, your idea is totally different from my idea, therefore we are different. And whereas mode of ignorance person says, what I know and what I say is right, that's it, everybody else is wrong, I cannot accept anybody else's thing, it's just my way or highway. So that is a kind of a knowledge that this kind of an exclusivistic person has. And they actually think that, my scripture is the only right way, my way of doing things are the only right way, what I know, that is only the right way. So this kind of a very fanatic exclusivistic mentality, a person in that, and it is also knowledge, understand, it is knowledge, but that knowledge is actually in the mode of ignorance, like that. Then we'll see about work, action, karma. That action which is regulated and which is performed without attachment, without love or hatred, and without desire for fruitive results is said to be in the mode of goodness. So work in the mode of goodness is dispassionate. Which is regulated, performed without any attachments, without love and hatred, raga and dvesha. Maybe, sometimes we get obsessively attached, or we get very repulsed, averse with something. So dispassionate, like what we've seen through many places in the Bhagavad Gita. Then what about activity, work in the mode of passion? Action performed with great effort by seeking to gratify one's senses. Basically, this is attachment is there. Any kind of attached endeavors is in the mode of passion. Whereas in mode of ignorance, what is the characteristic? Action performed in illusion, in disregard of scriptural injunctions, and without concern for future bondage or violence or distress caused to others. So it is a highly destructive activity. What today humankind is doing to this planet, this literally that we are disregarding the scriptural injunctions. We have no concern for future bondage. We are not concerned about what are the future implications that are going to come for my present action, right? And I don't even care about the future generations. And it's creating so much of hurt and violence and pain to not just us humans, but all forms of life, to the planet itself, the entire ecosystem of the planet. Right? There's a classical example of this kind of karma, work in the mode of ignorance, like that. So then we are going to talk about the doer, the karta. What is the mood of a karta? So the person in the mode of goodness, one who performs his duty without association with the modes of material nature, without false ego. So a sense of duty drives such a person. With great determination, they're highly determined. With great determination, enthusiasm, and without wavering in success or failure is said to be the worker in the mode of goodness. So they're extremely steady. Right? Success or failure, I need to do what I'm supposed to do. Pleasure or pain, comfort or discomfort, I need to do what I'm supposed to do. That's it. That is the nature of a doer in the mode of goodness. Whereas the mode of passion, what is the characteristic? A worker who is attached to work and the fruits of work. desiring to enjoy those fruits, who's always greedy, always envious, impure, and moved by joy and sorrow, is said to be in the mode of ignorance. So basically, very fruitive in mentality, fruitive, greedy, envious, right? And because he's moved by joy and sorrow, you'll never see steadiness in such kind of work, right? Just look at our own life. Sometimes you would have seen that it's very difficult to be consistent in our day-to-day activities, whether be it our own spiritual sadhana or sometimes even in our own occupational duties or our family responsibilities. We get so overwhelmed by joy and sorrow. On a joyous day, we put our 200% effort, and on a sad day we put 0% effort, right? We just can't be steady. We are so overwhelmed by our internal states. But whereas a person mode of goodness is steady no matter what, success, failure, happiness, unhappiness, they are not wavered by it. Then in mode of ignorance, what is the characteristic? Then, like very similar to work itself, the worker who's always engaged in work against the injection of scriptures, who's materialistic, obstinate, cheating, and expert in insulting others, who's lazy, always morose and procrastinating, is said to be worker in the mode of ignorance. So many characteristics here. He is materialistic, obstinate, right? Very disrespectful. When such a person performs certain action, they have high disregard to the people around them. Just get the thing done. That's it, right? So that is kind of that kind of obstinacy they show, and in the process they end up creating such a bad working environment around them, right? And then at the same time, some of them may also exhibit laziness and procrastination. Such a worker is said to be in the mode of ignorance, like that. So as you can see here, why is Krishna talking about all these characteristics? It's something for us to analyze, because whenever we are working, we are wearing all these hats subtly, right? As a worker, how am I doing, right? Analyze your own self. When I'm given some work, am I very steady? Am I doing it out of a sense of duty? Or is some fruitive goal at the end of the day is what it is motivating me? Or am I just extremely lazy, procrastinating my work, not doing what I'm supposed to do on time? Is that my response? So we know externally, am I in goodness, passion, or ignorance? Like that. So now he's going to talk about these other three factors: Geyam, Parigyata, and the Karanam. So first, he's going to talk about the aspect of the principle of understanding and determination according to three modes of material nature. So understanding, when you are performing some work, we need a particular kind of understanding here. So as a knower, Parigyata, so how am I? So let's see what is the understanding, or as a person who's involved at the level of planning or ideation, what is my consciousness in that particular action, right? So he says the understanding by which one knows what ought to be done and what ought not to be done, what is to be feared, what is not to be feared, what is binding, what is liberating, is said to be in mode of goodness. Or in one word, if I may define, such a knower has great deal of clarity. Clarity is a symptom of that mode of goodness. Whereas one who's in the mode of passion, which cannot distinguish between religion and irreligion, action that to be done, action that not to be done, is said to be in the mode of passion. Basically, such knower in the mode of passion is always confused between these two paths, left or right, option A or option B, door number 1 or door number 2, like that. So that they always in a sense of ambiguity. Where the person mode of ignorance, that understanding which considers irreligion to be religion and religion to be religion, right to be wrong and wrong to be right. They are perfectly convinced that the right answer is the wrong thing to do, and the wrong one is exactly what they would rush to do, under the spell of illusion and darkness, and always strives to go in the wrong direction. Such a knower is knower in the mode of ignorance. So basically, they are thoroughly confused. Confusion or illusion, right? That is the knower in the mode of ignorance. Then, what about determination? Because if I want to use my senses, my instruments of work, I need to apply my determination. So when Krishna is talking about this karanam, he uses the word determination, right? So what is the determination in the mode of goodness? That determination which is unbreakable, which is sustained with steadfastness by yoga practice, and which thus controls the activities of mind, life, and senses, is determination in the mode of goodness. Whereas basically such a person is steady in one's duty. Very, very determined person, because they are, they are so very clear, and the determination comes because of one's spiritual practice, right? Then in the mode of passion also, but that determination which holds fast to fruitive results in religion, economic development, and sense gratification. So basically, they are steady in fruitive mentality. Meaning that sometimes you will see, this is a very interesting phenomena also. Just by looking at external action of a person, you cannot fully know what is the level of what is motivating them, or what is giving them the determination in that external action, right? Because one can be steady because of a sense of duty. Like if you remember, as a karta, externally one may look in the mode of goodness, but the karanam, the determination, may be in the mode of passion, meaning that their steadiness is coming because they know at the end of the day, I'm going to enjoy all of that. One can be so consistent in plucking the fruits from morning to evening, and a passerby may see, wow, in hot sun, this person is standing there and very meticulously, dedicatedly plucking fruit after fruit. But what is their motivation? At the end of the day, I'm going to sell all these fruits and earn money myself. I'm not going to distribute it to the other people. So that's why I'm saying understanding all the 6 factors is so important. This mode of goodness has to permeate in all the 6 levels for us to not get entangled by the karmic reactions, right? Whereas the determination mode of ignorance, he says that determination which cannot go beyond dreaming, fearfulness, lamentation, moroseness, and illusion, such unintelligent determination is said to be in the mode of ignorance. Basically, they are always in dreamland, right? So all they do is that they sit down and dream. Yes, okay, I'm going to start my workout from today, right? But before that, let me first finish watching all the posts on my Instagram. After that, let me send few messages to my friends. And after that, I will, while lying on my bed, I will watch the YouTube video of how to do 100 push-ups. And they are always living in the dream. Their determination never goes past their bed, right? They never want to get up and do that action. Basically, that is what is beyond dreaming, or sometimes one can, their determination may also come out of certain external pressure due to fear of perhaps missing out on something or losing something or being punished by someone, or just due to peer pressure, right? So even that so-called determination coming due to peer pressure, externally, again, all three of them, person in goodness, passion, and ignorance, all three of them are working very hard, and externally they look very determined also, but the source of the determination is very different, and that is what we need to identify. So dreamland or fear, both are in the mode of ignorance. Like that. And finally, what is that object of knowledge? So object of knowledge here, ultimately we are all acting for what? To achieve happiness. Ultimately that is the goal of all our activities. If you ask any person a series of 7 why questions, why are you attending this class? Oh, because I want to learn Bhagavad Gita. Oh, why do you want to learn Bhagavad Gita? Because I'm going through certain problem in my life and I'm looking for some answer. Okay. So what happens if you find problems to your answer? Then I'll be very happy. Ultimately, deep down, everybody is looking for that happiness. So that is the ultimate object of all this knowledge that we are studying, right? Where we act in a very balanced, composed, happy, blissful way. So that again, Krishna is going to classify them. Very, very interesting classification, this one. What is the nature of happiness with regard to work? When you do a work, when you enjoy the result, ultimate goal, and you want to enjoy that, what is the mentality? Now, that which in the beginning may be like poison, so it may begin like poison, but it eventually converts to nectar. That which in the beginning may be just like poison, but in the end is like nectar, and which awakens one to self-realization, is said to be happiness in the mode of goodness. That is why this kind of happiness is the result of lot of austerity, lot of personal sacrifice, lot of hardships. That is a poison part, but eventually one experiences that joy, that nectar. Whereas happiness in the mode of passion, which is derived from contact of senses and their objects, which appears like nectar in the beginning, but it eventually turns to poison in the end. That is a happiness in nature of passion. All the instant titillations, gratifications that we experience, they may sound very nice in the beginning. Somebody may have certain habits, with some substances, right? They are experiencing, or even something like just simple, like smoking, for example. Ask any person who has any such kind of addictions, they will say that they're actually experiencing a thrill, but that thrill is only very soon going to kill them. That's the poison that is coming in the end. So that is one has to be very, very careful, because there is no genuine happiness in this world that comes easily. If the moment some happiness is coming very easily, immediately you should become suspicious. Where am I going wrong? Right? So like that. Then happiness in the mode of ignorance. That happiness which is blind to self-realization, which is delusion from beginning to end, which arises from sleep, laziness, and illusion, is said to be in the nature of ignorance. So basically, it starts as poison and ends as poison also. That is the happiness in this mode of ignorance. Right? Like Krishna explained that how nidra, alasya, pramada, so sleep, laziness, illusion. Right? So one may think they are happy when they are just lazing around, idling around, doing nothing. They're enjoying, but actually they are doing nothing. They're just going deeper and deeper tamas. And such people, they don't even enjoy what they are doing at that moment, and that becomes so toxic. The end result of such activity is also going to become toxic. So it's toxic in the beginning and toxic in the end, like that. So this entire analysis may sound a little very exhaustive and a little confusing. Especially, it can also be very overwhelming if you are reading the Bhagavad Gita for the first time. But I request you please read this section once again, these from text number 18 to 40, right? Because Krishna says in the 40th verse, there is no being existing either here or among the devatas in the higher planetary systems who is freed from these three modes born of material nature. So you have to understand, ultimately Prakriti is what that is doing everything. Prakrute kriyamanani, gune karmani, sarvashaha. Every karma is finally being performed by the gunas. So how are the gunas actually doing the work? This we understand here by understanding all the six factors: knowledge, object of knowledge, the knower of knowledge, work, instrument of work, and finally the doer of work. It may seem like I am doing, or when I'm writing, my pen is writing, but no, ultimately the gunas which are performing this action. They are the ones who are flowing through the channel of our body, mind, and certain external agencies. They are causing all this work to be done in this material world. So if you understand with which guna are we associating with, and if you can learn to steady ourselves, train ourselves first and steady ourselves to remain situated in the mode of goodness. So as a knower, I need to have, regarding the knowledge, I need to have inclusive knowledge. As a knower, I need to develop clarity. As an object of knowledge, I should be willing to go through poison because I know certain hard work is needed, and eventually I'll experience that nectar. As a work, nature of my work, it should be very, very dispassionate. As when it comes to the determination I'm exhibiting, it has to be steady, not motivated out of some external fear, peer pressure, or some fruity mentality, but motivated because of the sense of duty. And finally, because of that, as a doer, I will also be very determined, dutiful, steady, and so on, like that. So these are the six factors, 3 motivation factors and 3 constitution factors, which Krishna elaborates upon. So if we understand these things, right? So the moment I associate or act, or if any of the 6 factors are in mode of passion or ignorance, I am only binding myself to this world, then I cannot be aloof from this world. But if I stick to that mode of goodness, gradually I will start rising higher and higher and higher. Of course, we have to practice something, spirituality, to transcend that. That is a theme that we'll take up in the next section in tomorrow's class. But at least at our level, we need to process. Because the Gita philosophy, remember, I time and again have repeated this, how Gita philosophy is a socially integrated, socially engaging spirituality. So we have to still perform our work, perform our duties. But if we can operate at the level of mode of goodness and introspectively analyze how are all these 6 factors for me in my own personal life, and what changes can I bring in order to raise the level of my modes. If I'm in the passion or ignorance, how do I bring that factor to goodness? If you're already in goodness, how do I take it to more deeper and deeper levels? That should be our approach. Right? So that is the whole science of when we said detached work, it may sound like a very one simple word, but unless we work hard in all the 6 areas, that state of detached work, detached engagement does not really come like that. So in the next section, we will start tomorrow. We will begin by discussing the inclination part. We discussed the how today, how to work, but what do I do? Right? That what part, how do I determine that based on my nature and inclination, is something that we'll discuss in tomorrow's class. So let me very quickly summarize what we discussed today. So we are discussing Moksha Yoga, the last chapter, the concluding chapter of the Bhagavad Gita, where Arjuna begins with a question, very interesting question about what is the difference between renunciation and a renunciate. And Krishna very nicely explains that a renunciate is one who not just gives up whimsically activities, but based on, gives up materialistic desires, activities based on materialistic desires. Whereas renunciation is just the act of giving up the results of one's activities. And, and the idea is there is actually no difference between these two. Because Krishna says that these 3 things, Yajna, Dana, Tapa, that we discussed in our last class, are something that are mandatory for everyone. So better become a Tyagi, which means better give up the results of one's activities. So that way also you can be free from karma. And to highlight that, Krishna spoke about the renunciation in 3 modes. So if you see that renunciation, the goodness, is exactly what a tyagi also does. Therefore, there is no difference between a tyagi and a sannyasi. One who's giving up the results of one's activities is as good as those advanced recluse renunciates who have given up this world and gone to the forest, into some caves or forest. Even a person living in this world who's giving up the results of an activities is as good as them. So it's easy to say giving up the results of an activities or work in a detached way, but now Krishna is going to explain that science. What does it take to act in a detached way? For that, first we need to understand what are the factors of work. So adhishtanam, karta, karanam, cheshta, daivam. These are 5 factors of work. The body, the place of work, the performer, the conditioned consciousness influenced by the false ego, the instruments of action, the senses, the prana, the endeavor, and finally the daiva, the super soul factor. All these 5 factors put together, they are coming together and creating our motivations and the physical constitution of work. And those have been elaborated further into 3 and 3 categories, total 6 factors that we saw. And we need to try to stick to mode of goodness, right? And it doesn't matter externally what activity we are doing, a theme that we'll talk about in tomorrow's discussion, right? But it really doesn't matter whether you are a warrior in the battlefield, or whether you are a brahmana sitting down somewhere and teaching scriptures, or whether you are this hardcore corporate business head, every day having very what should I say, the nature of the work may be passionate, but internally, if we can keep our motivation, constitution, mode of goodness, that extremely high energy businessman who's working in that kind of an environment is as good as a sadhu who's peacefully sitting and teaching scriptures somewhere in the Gurukul, right? So this is the theme that we have for today. So let's take up any questions or comments anybody has. All right. Yes, Gail, go ahead, ask a question.
Hare Krishna Prabhu. Yeah, I need to refer to that page, to the motivation constitution slide. I got very confused actually, because for a few reasons. One is because, when you first start distinguishing between motivation and constitution, the transmission was frozen a lot. And so we lost a lot of the sense of what you were trying to say. And so another thing is that this word constitution, I'm not sure exactly what is meant by this word. And so therefore, how the 3 categories of it fit in with it is also kind of lost on me.
Okay. So when I'm trying to work, usually what you see is external work, right? Like, yes. For example, when I'm trying to build something, so my external action is constituted of my physical body, myself as the doer, and that external work that you are seeing. Okay, here I'm trying to build something with my hands. So you are seeing my action doing something. I'm trying to say do clay molding, right? Mm-hmm. So you're seeing my fingers that are working, and you're seeing me, the doer. All these 3. Though it may seem like you are seeing only one thing, but all these 3 are together the constituents of that externalization of that work. But at an internal level, in that work, I need to know what I am doing. I need to know the object, ultimately, why am I doing? And also the person when I'm doing an action, I'm the doer, but at the level of internal level, I'm the planner, I'm the knower. So the same person that we're talking about, the knower and the doer are the same, but it's the frame of reference from which we are looking at it. So that is what Krishna is using the term motivation. So yes, some of these terms may sound a little confusing. There may be some overlap, because we are at the end of the day we are dealing with just one thing. Here I am talking, but in this process of talking, all the 6 roles I am playing, or all the 6 factors you will see involved like that.
Yeah, I think the overlap is part of the problem. But again, when you use this word constitution, you're saying, those 3 factors together, right? The work, the person, and let's say the product, or
the instruments of work. Yes.
The instruments, and the motivation is more the internal workings.
Yes. So what is my inner space, and what is the outer visible
manifestation
of work? Yes.
Okay. I will have to review this part. But another question is, when you're describing how those in the various modes view other living entities, right? So the one in the goodness, yes, everybody is a soul, regardless of the body they're carrying. The one in passion, they see, dog person is a different altogether from, a beetle person or a human person. But those in the mode of ignorance, how do they view living entities? How do they view living entities?
So when we spoke about that kind of a exclusivistic vision, so they are so specifically regarding people, for example, they are so narrow-minded that they see that if anything that looks like me or like us that they identify with, they are the only people. They don't even acknowledge the existence of other people. No beetle people, cow people, bird people. There's only one kind. So they have this kind of a very exclusivistic vision there. So this
is exactly my point. This is where I was confused. How is that different from those in the mode of passion?
In the mode of passion, they acknowledge the existence of variety, the differences, right? They are looking at things separately. Okay, here is this. Okay, here are category A, category B, category C, right? Whereas the person in this kind of mode, especially regarding the work in which context we are discussing here, Krishna himself says that they think that what I know or what I do is the only right thing. Everybody else is wrong, right?
Yeah.
So which means, for example, like remember, if I may stretch the example, what my scripture says is the only right thing. Everybody else is wrong. That process which I know, the methodology that I know, that is the only right methodology. Everybody else is wrong. So they are so narrow-minded in their approach. They can't think beyond what they think they know. So likewise with regard to seeing people also, at least a personal mode of passion is acknowledging the existence of the other person. Though they are categorizing that, okay, category A, category C, the person mode of ignorance is not even bothering to acknowledge that this is the only thing that exists. That is it. Everything else is wrong. Nothing exists.
But my problem is that even if you're in the mode of ignorance, right? I mean, they're not going to confuse a zebra with a cow, So I'm trying to understand.
Okay. So let's so specifically regarding, that you may say that the mode of goodness person will see, yes, there is soul in all living entities.
Yes.
Mode of passion person will start creating differences among various species. The mode of ignorance person says, we are the only ones that exist. Everything is there's no life in that. It is, like there was for some time certain countries and cultures believed that human beings alone had soul. Other species do not have soul. Sometimes they would even in some traditions, they also believe that some genders also do not have soul.
But do those in the mode of passion, do they believe, those who see distinction between species, right? That they don't see that it's all the same soul, and they see different types of. So do they, those in the mode of passion, do they believe that the different species have souls or not?
No, they even the concept of soul itself doesn't exist. They just see physical differences at the material level, at the bodily level.
But this is also the mode of ignorance, isn't it?
Well, the subtle difference is that at least you are acknowledging that there are different species, whereas a mode of ignorance, person doesn't even respect their existence. At least mode of person exists, is respecting their existence, but is saying you are different from me.
Okay.
But mode of ignorance person says, even you exist or don't exist, I don't value you.
Okay.
Like that.
Okay, it's more of a question of valuing than.
Yes, it's again a very subtle difference, but specifically in this context, Krishna is using it from a perspective of how does one approach towards work in general, right? And as knowledge with respect to, as a motivation of work, an inclusivistic person appreciates all kinds of perspectives, right, and tries to see a common thread in them. And a separatist person sees that, okay, mine and yours separate, and an exclusivist person says mine, only that's mine. It. Nothing else exists. Everything else is useless. Yeah.
Okay, Prabhu. Thank you so much.
Hare Krishna. Thank you. Okay, are there any other questions or comments? Okay, there's a. Okay, let's see. There's a question in the chat box which says, how can we do our daily work and don't look up on its results? Any real life example, so it will be easier. Okay, this is something that we had discussed in the past also, right? So the idea is that when you identify what that mode of goodness does, basically if you just come to the level of mode of goodness, that becomes many times your default mode of functioning itself. But as we discussed in the earlier first 6 chapters of Gita, when there is a higher motivation motivating us, a higher purpose driving us, then you will see, like for example, you have to go to office and earn money, because by earning money you are going to support your family and children, etc., maybe extended family and so on, right? So the idea is there, your sense of, that is a good example of detached work. It's not that, okay, today I feel like going to office or I don't feel like going to office. It's not like that, but rather a higher purpose, that, okay, higher sense of responsibility, that, hey, look, I need to go work, because it's not about me feeling good or bad, but rather it's about fulfilling a certain higher commitment. So there itself one is acting on a higher plane and working in a detached way, right? So that is a very, very simple practical example to relate with, right? Of course, the highest motivation comes when we connect to a very deep spiritual motivation, and that is a motivation which Krishna has been giving to Arjuna throughout. Work for me, always think of me and work for me. So that is the level which Krishna is also going to talk about in the second half of this chapter. All right. Okay, so let's hear one more question. Alok ji, would you like to ask your question?
Prabhuji, I am actually forgetting that false ego wala concept. Can you just revisit that concept?
Okay, in the context of.
So you said that we also have the false ego, wherein.
I today we discussed how an action becomes materialistic or karmic when it is motivated by false ego. In that context?
Right.
Right. Okay. Right. Yeah. So, see, an action in itself is not materialistic. When we call something materialistic or something motivated by the gunas, when the initial impetus is born from a sense of enjoyment, a sense of I am the doer. That motivation is what I'm calling it as false ego. If you remember, in the 5th chapter we discussed this, that how the living entity is just an instigator of desire. In its existence in this material world, the living entity is just desiring, and Paramatma, hearing that desire, triggers the gunas, the prakriti, to do whatever external action. But if that instigation is born out of a selfish, egoistic tendency, then whatever action comes out of that material nature activity, we have to face the consequences in the form of reaction. But when that instigation is born out of a selfless, higher purpose, even better, a spiritual purpose, then such actions will not have reactions. That is the whole concept of akarma, which we discussed in the 4th chapter of the Gita, right? Non-reactionary work. So essentially, moment we are motivated by a sense of false identity, especially the deep, even the subtlest of the identity, that somewhere I'm here, the enjoyer, somewhere. Again, when I use the word enjoyment, it is not that we have to be miserable in our existence in this world. We have to be miserable in our action. It is not that. The greatest enjoyment actually comes through selflessness. In service, the soul enjoys the most. This is a deeper concept in the Bhakti Shastra that is described, that how the very dharma of the soul, whose nature is to experience that ananda, and that ananda comes when the soul experiences or finds a fulfillment in loving and being loved, and that love is being manifested through acts of service. Because love is not just a noun, it's a verb, it's an action, it's a physical action. And that activity of selfless, love is what that creates ananda. That is the whole concept of rasa, and that's where the soul experiences real bliss. So if you see at a fundamental level, the dharma of the soul is that level of selfless action. But the moment the soul becomes selfish, then it adopts a false identity that I am the enjoyer. And that's one identity that we carry. And that is the ego that comes into the loop. And then we get into the whole materialistic cycle. Right? So that's what I meant there. All right. Thank you. Hare Krishna. Okay. Yes, Gailji, one last question. Go ahead.
I'm sorry. Yeah, I forgot. When you were discussing the prana, right, in connection with our endeavors, right, I was just wondering how the prana is connected to, because it seemed like with the gross physical things, like the action senses, right, walking, grasping, yeah, I understood your explanation there. But when it comes to the knowledge acquiring senses, the prana is also involved there, huh? And those are considered.
Yes, very much. Even right now, as you're listening to this class, you are spending some of your energy into it. Right?
And it's facilitated by the prana when I'm hearing, for example. Because exactly. I'm not acting on the world like with the karmendriya, right? I'm not acting.
Yes. Even see, even that which is empowering all our senses is also the prana. Yes.
Okay, and so therefore, just trying to distinguish a little bit better for myself the distinction between the endeavor and the kshetra or the
body.
Because the body. One of the 5 factors is just the body itself, but the body is comprised of the senses only, basically, right?
Yes, yes.
So when we say that the body is distinct from the
prana,
the sense, the senses and the prana.
Mm-hmm.
So what we're saying is the body is a separate factor because that is basically the locale of the prana and the senses. So we're making that the distinction in that way, is it?
So think of prana to be like the electricity running the machine called as the body.
Okay.
Right. So there is some energy which is triggering the prana to function. Right. So think of prana to be something like that. So in that way, there is a distinction between body and the prana. Senses are actually, body and senses are the outermost layer of our being, the physical being. But just one layer under the subtler than the senses is the layer of prana. Prana, literally, you can say anything that is flowing in your body is the effect of prana. Like right now, if there is air moving in my body, there is blood moving in my body, there are nervous signals moving within my body. These are all effects of prana. There is energy stored within my body, within the cells of my body. That is also prana. So there are these 5 pranas. Each of them have their own functions. So yeah. So it is. You'll see. When I say energy stored in my body, it is not present in one sense or one finger or one eye or one ear. It is something that is there, pervading throughout this body. Right. So prana operates something like
So when you refer to the energy stored in my body, you're referring to the prana itself.
Yes.
Okay, and that prana is what makes everything on a both gross and subtle level function.
Yes. Even so by subtle level, if it's just thoughts, the thought layer is actually one layer subtler than the prana.
Yes.
Right. But what prana basically does is it converts the mental action into physical action. So even the act of seeing is also a physical act. Right. But when the mind wants to see something, it triggers the eye through its prana and causes the phenomena of sight to take place. Imagine eye to be like a camera, but until I send the electricity to the camera, the signal cannot be processed and seen like that.
Yes, and that signal is sent by the prana.
Yeah, that electric, the power signal is actually, yes, exactly, sent by the prana. Right?
Yeah.
Actually, the prana is actually a very subtle concept because many times we only see, subtle body, gross body, very easy to connect with these two things. But there's a channel in between which is causing the mental activities to be translated into a physical movement. Like I'll give a simple example. When I say I want to raise my hand, what is happening? A thought called raise your hand comes, but it has to create, for this hand to move, compression of these muscles and expansion of these muscles, and that is how my hand is raised. But for that to happen, some nervous signals have to go. So certain nerves have to activate, that here this, and once the nerves get activated, the cells in this body have to release the energy, saying that here there's action happening in these two levels. Start releasing the energy, and once the energy is released, then the physical action takes place. So my karmendriya called as hand moves only when the hand gets energy from the cells and the cells receive signal in the form of nervous signals. All that phenomena happening in the background is the prana triggering those things.
Well, I think in modern day science, right, what you described as prana, wouldn't scientists call that the brain?
So, like I said, brain is only giving nervous signals, but prana is many factors. Like even the blood which is flowing in your body is the effect of prana. the food that we eat, it flows through the entire system from the mouth to the excretory organs is happening due to the flow of prana. The lymphatic nodes which are removing the waste from every cell of your body, that is prana. So literally our entire body, all the systems in your body are running because of that prana.
Including the brain.
Including the brain, exactly. All the nervous signals which are being released by the brain are also the effect of prana.
Yeah, so therefore, when the scientists say that the brain triggers this or that, they're not seeing the more fundamental cause.
Yes, actually. Exactly. Yes. So even because the moment you use the word brain, you still enter into the physical plane.
Yes.
Right? Like I'll give you another example, which is if you don't eat food, you will see that your ability to think also comes down.
Yes.
So there is some prana missing because of which you're not able to think. The brain is there, but there is something some nourishment not going to the brain because of which that nourishment is the prana, finally.
Well, I think they would have said that, well, you know, I'm not able to think because my brain isn't nourished. The scientists would say, no?
I lost your signal here. Can you repeat that?
Yeah, I think the scientists would have said that the reason why I'm not able to think is because I haven't given my brain nourishment.
Okay, Gail, I lost your signal here. Can you repeat your last statement?
Oh, can you hear me now? Yeah, I think I've lost you. I hear you, but you don't hear me. I don't know. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare. Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare.
Okay. Okay, I think we can take up this question in the next session because I think I lost the signal here. All right. Okay, so let's end the discussion here. Tomorrow we'll have a little more time. We can take up more questions if you like. All right, so let's conclude with the closing mantra. Joining your palms together. Om Sahana Bhavatu Sahana Bhunattu Sah Viryam Karavavahai Tejasvinavadhitamastu Ma Vidvishavahai. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Jaya Sri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Sri Advaita Gadadhara Shiva Sadi Gaura Bhakta Vrinda. Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare. So thank you all very much. So tomorrow we will see the last part of 18th chapter, that will be the concluding section. And with that, we'll finish our study of the Bhagavad Gita. And the class after that on Sunday, we will actually have a one chapter, one session summary of the entire Bhagavad Gita. All right. Thank you so much. Hare Krishna.